Consensus enables recording in progress. All right, so Consensus enables access to Web3. We have a lot of products that are household names. We have MetaMask, Truffle, Infura. We acquired Quorum from JP Morgan last year, as well as Codify, which is a lot of different modules that we've built off of our production enterprise engagements. And so just some numbers, MetaMask is currently up to 15 million monthly active users. Even higher than that. It's really connecting DeFi and NFTs. Truffle is still the world's most used smart contract framework for source control, for kind of general deployment. Infura is more or less the fastest way to get started. We have 300,000 users or so. Every day we do about 10 billion or so API requests. Quorum, we just launched something called Quorum Blockchain Service. We acquired from the Microsoft side Azure blockchain service. We even hired Mark McCurry, who ran that group. So we have now a Quorum blockchain service with a few dozen large enterprises live with Quorum blockchain. And on the Codify side, we have a Codify assets and payments platform. And so we've worked with 9 different central banks and built a lot of sandboxes, and worked with policy, talked about MCBDCs, or kind of multi-currency CBDCs. And we talked to the BIS quite a bit, which is a consortium of central banks. So let's just get started with DAOs. We'll share the slides. And I also recognize that some of you may have attended the earlier session about DAOs. I just watched it this morning. I thought it was very good. I'll go a little bit faster than he did. And so I'll just kind of summarize some of this. The takeaways here is that a DAO is really a decentralized autonomous organization that's global and open. I like to think of it as a shared bank account. So there is a DAO treasury, there's a fund associated to it, and the organic collaboration across multiple parties is really how you spend that DAO treasury. It is the creation, and I'll show a lot of other slides associated to this, but I'm really excited for it. We'll do a little bit of history as well. DAOs have evolved in their purpose, coordination, creativity. You can work full-time for a DAO now. There's a lot of people who do this because most of these protocols have so much money. They more or less are finding new workers and trying to see who can work with them in a very open source manner. There's also DAO tooling. When people start these decentralized organizations, they always have thoughts on, well, which tools should I use to get started? How do I basically coordinate across kind of the chaos of getting things done? Consensus 1.0. So Consensus started in 2015, started by Joseph Lubin, who's one of the co-founders of Ethereum. He basically started kind of the first DAO in my mind when he was kind of building out Consensus as a future of work project. He paid everyone in ETH those days, and he was kind of organically letting people build projects like an accelerator, like an incubator. And yeah, he created kind of the mesh and where the mesh evolved into. Consensus today is now a software company that builds products that has a hierarchy, which is kind of interesting. So maybe the future of DAOs will go back into a hierarchy. And then we also have been building tools for DAOs, as well as thinking through, after NFTs, how do DAOs get used from issuance all the way to kind of digital assets. So the DAO, which is basically Slockit, it was a company that was doing fundraising. This wasn't the first DAO out there, but I think it's the most famous one in some ways. What they were doing is proving that you can fundraise and use early day ERC20 tokens as more or less an open VC network. This was around 2016. And the idea is that your delivery versus payments, right? If I wanted to purchase Slockit tokens, I would have to lock up ETH, and that ETH had value. I believe it took up quite a bit of value in the entire Ethereum network, because people had all this ETH, they didn't know what to do with it. Hey, let's just invest into one company. And so Slockit blew up because there was a contract bug, and famously it led to the hard fork of Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. Ethereum Classic still exists today. I don't know why, but it still does. And it is an outcome of this particular hack in the basically a bug in the smart contract. From there, I like to bring up Moloch DAO. So Moloch DAO was shortly created afterwards, thinking about how do you solve coordination problems. So Moloch is this kind of monster that leads to humans just kind of being chaotic, and we try to fight Moloch through different tools. There has been upgrades from the original kind of DAO smart contracts, and there's different ways to coordinate now that's a little bit cleaner, that kind of prevents any type of I guess mal type of bad acting. And so the voting around this, the self-organizing, the incentive mechanisms really came from a lot of times forking Moloch DAO into other types of DAOs. MakerDAO has also been around for a long time. Bringing this up because it was an interesting journey. If you listen to the MakerDAO podcast out there that interview the founders, I mean, they basically started off more centralized and they tried to decentralize themselves over time because they wanted the protocol rules and how the stablecoin interacts to be much more democratized. So when they accept new collateral for their Maker collateral depository receipt, it is a voting mechanism now. It used to just be, oh, well, we'll control that it has to be, wrapped ETH or other types of, or wrapped Bitcoin, but now I think it's evolved quite a bit. This is a snapshot from a Masari. Masari has a view, and I probably took this a few months ago, so these prices are off, but it has different types of voting, delegated versus direct, and also different types of proposals that get into here. So the common proposals. So why do I need a proposal? It's because this is an open network. We're using the blockchain here as coordination software, right? The smart contracts allow parties to vote, and then you have transparent kind of view of the votes because every party has to sign a transaction. You have to prove that you have shares, and then you can vote. So it's a lot like regular day corporate actions, as well as regular day work that you would do with an LLC. If you needed to, if you've ever created a company, you know that your secretary has to submit certain documentation that shows that you've had meetings, and your treasurer has to, review your finances. And then if you have a board of some sort, you have to do some voting in order to make major changes. So I think all of those types of corporate actions and all of those types of management of companies has been embedded into smart contracts. And so imagine, now instead of if you wanted to onboard, let's say you're an index DAO and you're choosing investments, you can vote as a proposal on pretty much adding a new investment into the smart contract. So you could say like, oh, well, we want to spend our money this way. Let's all agree that the due diligence was good, and then let's kind of move that money for the investment. The DAO ecosystem is growing very, very quickly. I think that I have a source to this that I can share as well. I think it's deepdao.com. .io. There it is. So let me share that with you guys. This just has a great overview of how it's grown, and it definitely has, even since I took that screenshot. There it is. So you can go through the different organizations and their tokens and what type of platform they use for starting it off. Compound, one of the earlier DAOs, has base contracts. Everything is open source kind of in this world, so you can always use someone else's code. It's kind of the great part of this. You can use other pieces of governance to agree on certain type of decisions. Aragon is another OG. There's quite a bit of tools out there. So yeah, this even said like 3.8.5, and now it's up to 12. So how do you participate and how do you get started? I would say that most of the time people that get started think about, oh, well, I need these tokens to to be a part of the DAO. And so they just go into MetaMask and do a swap and they just buy the governance tokens. That's one way to do it. You can also just go to Snapshot. That's a kind of an off-chain version of voting and see who's making which proposals and to pay attention to each of these protocols. You can also get started by investing into DAOs. So when the DAOs are first created, and I went to MCon earlier, I guess it was 2 months ago, and a lot of people in conferences were talking about the DAOs that they're part of, and then they were also thinking about which new DAOs that they can create. And so I started investing into a few DAOs from there. There's no other way to do it, really. You just have to know some people and be open with them on how technical you are, how you want to contribute, your special skills, and then they will say, oh, well, you can join our DAO, you can help us build it and get started. And everyone is very, very friendly. They're very happy to join forces and to share lessons learned with each other. The third is to buy the DAO tokens to join the DAO Discord and then just be helpful, right? Everything is pretty much in Discord or discourse forums or something of that sort. I would highly recommend creating a separate identity from your current one. If I'm going in with consensus in mind, then I may be myself, which was using my consensus ID, but I have many, many different identities out there. And so I would never kind of dox my own identity in these places unless you're actually working for them. Like you have to apply to work with Raid Guild, for example, to provide services. Then you probably should use your name because then you might get paid and you have to then submit your W-2s and all those things. So that's when you would ultimately give your real name out. But you could be kind of like an anon author out there, just lurking around these different DAO discords. And then within the DAO, there are projects that get put together. And so your next step of participation is really getting paid by the DAO to complete a piece of work. Maybe you're writing an article for them. Maybe you're interviewing different people. Maybe you're writing some code with them. And that is the compensation from the DAO. Could be in the DAO tokens or in real stable coins, and you can get paid directly. So I think I mentioned this earlier. The reason why I think DAOs are great is because the old way of a public company is to inform shareholders through all of the agents in the middle. And so your governance in the traditional world, if you're a public company, has a lot of steps in between. We're working through parties that own pieces of your shares that then have to inform all of their shareholders. And so it gets a little bit complicated because when you have to coordinate a huge meeting, releasing any type of new news about the company and your public holdings and all of these other things. Usually, when you announce your earnings and whatnot, that is a very large coordination problem. In the crypto protocol and crypto world, it's really done by knowing who owns your tokens because it's a transparent ledger again. And then the voting itself is also done through transactions. So imagine voting, but on one platform, which is great. And so governance power, and this is where people start doing DAO lobbying or governance protocol lobbying, is they purchase a lot of governance tokens so that they can more or less help with, or maybe maliciously even add certain tokens to those networks. I personally bought quite a bit of governance tokens across my time because within consensus, for example, we had to list Filecoin into Aave. And so in order to do that, we had to either lobby with the existing Aave group or work with Filecoin or work with other parties to say, hey, it would be a great idea to have Filecoin in an Aave exchange or in an Aave pool. So that happens quite a bit. I'm sure a lot of major players that have separate monolithic blockchains, other layer ones, also do the same thing. Cool. And there's also the creation of Metacartel, which I like. Metacartel hosted the MCon conference, and it's quite impressive how much they've invested. They kind of more or less put money into everything and into most of the successful projects. They are an investment DAO, and they provide a lot of accelerator and incubator input. And they're also, again, very open. So when you attend conferences or when you speak with them on Discord, they will share a lot of information. You can also work for a DAO. There's a very famous one called Raid Guild. Go to the Raid Guild handbook to learn more about it. But essentially, you could be a freelancer or consultant working for a DAO and getting paid by a DAO based on your certain set of skills. And it's super interesting. I mean, just going through the process and talking to different parties. When you're starting fundraising and you're building your own DAO or you're doing some other thing in this space, most people hire Raid Guild, and then Raid Guild kind of goes off and hires some other parties, like maybe Mystic Whales and things like that, to do specific fundraising. So it's an interesting DAO to DAO relationship out there. This was the evolution of Moloch, and it used to be, and I think this is important because it used to be quite easy to propose just anything. And now it's become a few steps. And so the sponsoring and unsponsoring is a way to filter in so that you're not just, you don't have a queue of random proposals that are provided by anyone. They don't enter into the voting mechanism until it is sponsored by certain parties. I love writing lists of 30, and I have done a podcast, 30 episodes, where I talk about different lists of 30. And after attending MCon, I wrote my own here about different patterns that I spoke about. Is there governance to address any special interest group dominating in a DAO? That is a good question. There's no, I don't think there's a standard out there. I mean, there is obviously special interest groups inside of DAOs, but I don't think that there's a technical solution for that right now. You can see the distribution, and you can see, who has more influence of what votes. But yeah, that's a good question. So the DAO landscape is already pretty big, and it's much bigger than this. This was done by Koopa Troopa, and I can send you a link to that as well. Over here, he is a mirror writer, which is great. And this goes through the current DAO landscape. If you want to read it in more detail, I'll just give a quick overview right now. There's different types of DAOs that we've seen. Essentially, you can create a DAO operating system or DAO toolset, and these are just the tools that are helping other DAOs succeed. Investment DAOs are very, very popular. You're more or less coordinating how to spend the funds to invest into different stages for different companies. Maybe it's DAOs investing into other DAOs. And grants are also very popular. If you have a lot of money from your protocol, you will likely create some type of grant DAO and hand out grants to specific research projects and pay them for the reports and pay them for the results. There's also collector DAOs for NFTs or other types of assets. So you join the DAO, and then the DAO decides which NFTs to buy, something like Flamingo DAO. The idea is to have the DAO itself become a portfolio. Within that portfolio, you are collecting different tokens. It's different from investments because investments would be earlier days seed funding or series funding. Protocol DAOs, that is when you want to create a new protocol like Uniswap, SushiSwap, and versions of that. You will want to provide a transparent roadmap of different tokens that you're adding to your protocol. For example, MakerDAO is a good example of this. There's also service DAOs, which are different from the tools themselves. Service DAOs, you can hire other DAOs with activities like Raid Guild. I think this is again, super useful for when you're trying to start a company. And you could just replace the word DAO with a company, really, here. In all intents and purposes. I mean, this is a space that is reinventing how people coordinate and how things get done. It's just that these DAOs have a lot of money, so they are, reinventing this globally. I think one of our marketing folks said that DAOs seem a lot like the early days of like Star Trek geek groups that just have a lot of money, but they're really just coordinating different types of meetups. They're using their money for doing fan stuff. It's kind of like interesting how things go viral, interesting how things get together. There's also social DAOs like Friends with Benefits. You go in there and you can connect with other parties that already are pretty interested in NFTs, for example. You can connect with artists, and then you can build some type of artwork. You can even do like a 2 or 3 person DAO of artists, like an artist collaboration. From the DAO, you can ask your participants what type of artwork to build or to make, and then out of the created artwork, you can launch it as an NFT and then sell it at an auction where the DAO itself owns a portion of the NFT in some way. Or there's even pooling DAO. So if you think about the collector DAO, essentially the pool of participants buying using those funds is now owning that piece. And so the reason why you have a DAO in this case is the DAO represents a single address. It has a single identity. And so when you purchase something, the NFT must be owned by a single identity. That's the whole point. And so if it's owned by a company, then the parties that have shares in that company will then effectively be partial owners of that NFT. So when you think about fractionalizing NFTs, some people think about it that way, which is the DAO has purchased it, and therefore the percent ownership of the pool of the DAO are now fractionally owning that NFT versus taking an NFT and then sharding it and then kind of selling it on the secondary market. Another one is a media DAO, and the media DAO really like Forefront just curates content and creates newsletters. Mirror even has its own ways of starting from scratch, right? Starting from the NFT that represents an article, you can then engage with participants and basically do a lot of cool stuff like fundraising, any type of crowdfunding platform. Mirror already has that. You can directly fundraise through Mirror now. And then that in itself is an NFT, and then all participants have their own addresses that people can tip them. So all of the things that happened in Web 2 that took many, many years to get to, like AngelList and even Reddit with micro transactions on tipping, that has already come into play in the Web3 world. Okay, so how do you create a DAO? First is the DAO manifesto. So people usually use Gitbook, where they write up a handbook, and you can find the one for Raid Guild. I think that's a great example. Then you can use a DAO tool like DAO House, and DAO House can more or less create this Moloch V2 DAO from scratch. It's just pretty easy to do. You need some funds to create it, but you're more or less using Web 2 tools to create a Web 3 smart contract. Then people create a Discord or Telegram channel and they communicate through there. That seems to be the main way of communication. There's no Slack in kind of this DAO world. Everyone likes to use Discord. From there, there's probably some coordination across multiple DAOs to raise funds to do your initial allocation. So this is similar to regular financial capital formation, right? When you start a company, you're using the same set of tools. It's just that this is much more advanced and involves a blockchain from the beginning. And I think Jamil mentioned Wyoming DAO. One second. Sorry about that. So with Wyoming DAO, what they're really doing is recognizing that different types of activities that happen with your LLC can be linked, and therefore you're kind of given more transparency and data back to Wyoming so that you can have a representation and linking of your LLC company to the DAO address. And so that's very similar to saying like, oh, well, my company exists, so I need to start a website, right? I'll go to Squarespace, start a website, and then now I have a company that's linked to my website, and now I have an email address that's linked to the domain name. Similarly, there will likely be an ENS Ethereum naming service type of domain mapping. And so with your DNS name, you may also have an ENS associated to it that points to your company, that points to your DAO. And then your DAO treasury could be funded by other DAOs. It could be you as an individual, as a founder, putting money from a regular fiat bank account into crypto, into your DAO. And so that is really the initial funding of your company. And then your initial allocation of voting is kind of part of that as well. So DAO Treasury, these are all kind of minting processes. So you have ceremonies associated with this, very similar to legally, you have to go with a lawyer to submit the documentation, pay the fees to start a company with a particular state, that type of thing, but now all on chain, right? So that's kind of the cool part. From there, you can organically grow your community and almost immediately do additional fundraising, right? Having more people join the DAO means that they're buying tokens to join the DAO, or at least contributing to the growth of the DAO itself and kind of the token price. Then the manifesto usually does some changing, some organic growth. And so for the manifesto, other parties start to either, do some due diligence, share notes based on what your DAO does. So if you're an investment DAO, there are analysts that then can say, like, I think we should, cross invest some of our funds into this other DAO. And then you can also join a community of parties that mentor and partner with each other and other DAOs. And then you start to invest yourself into multiple DAOs. So it is kind of crazy, but it's also a little relatable. It just looks like regular company times working with accelerators, but without kind of those middlemen, without kind of established participants. And so as I picture this, and as you want to get involved, just think about it as a lot of DAOs with a lot of money trying to work with each other to kind of coordinate some greater future, right? So they are usually very friendly. So yeah, no VC in the middle. That's kind of big, but DAOs are VCs now. So anyway, there's a lot of DAO sloshing money around. Like Metacartel, as I mentioned, is everywhere. So okay, so the patterns that I really love, and as I wrote my list of 30, thinking about linking DAOs to ENS names, LLCs have websites. Now LLCs will have DAOs that have ENS names, and therefore all corporate action management can be done through the DAO transparently. Hopefully this catches on everywhere. I mean, you have to still adhere to your local rules. And the reason why you need an LLC, and for those thinking like, oh, well, I'm just going to be my own, freelancer consultant, it makes sense for you to have an LLC as well, so that you're protecting yourself. So I don't think that there are personal DAOs out there. I think that would be really, really cool. But before that, I think as with any consulting business, you should create an LLC, put some money into it, get paid through the LLC, and then pay yourself from the LLC to the individual. That's just the right way to do things, so that if you get sued, you can just fold your company and you don't, lose your house, more or less. So LLCs are important as kind of this middle layer to protect yourself, because at the end of the day, if you get paid and you have to, do taxes, doing taxes with the LLC are also a little complicated, but also a little bit simpler than kind of mingling your other types of payrolls. There's also DAO M&A happening, which is DAOs combining their resources and combining assets and growing in valuation. The valuation of DAOs is also very different. So each DAO has its own token, and everyone wonders, like, what's the floor price of this DAO token? Why is this worth more than another one? Like, why did Friends with Benefits start off with, a few $100 to join, which was fine, and now it's literally $10,000 to join. So very prohibitive to join these types of Discord channels if they add in this kind of gating factor. But also a lot of opportunity, because there's for Bored Ape Yacht Club, right? That is also a permission token where you must have permission in order to join some conversations in collab land. So yeah, people are using this as kind of gating and specialized communities as well. There's also collaboration of DAOs between artists. I think I mentioned this before, having a collaborative project between artists and kind of their close fans and opening it up into voting on what type of project they should do. And then these artists come together and build something and then sell it as an NFT. DAO namespaces, I think, hasn't been discussed publicly yet, but I'm really excited for it because right now, DNS, provided for .org and .edu are reserved for nonprofits and kind of educational specific parties. And so if DAO namespaces exist the same way, then if you have a trust or if you have a type of crypto trust of some sort, right, you can more or less say, well, send it to an ENS that is specific to a namespace, instead of saying like, oh, well, you only can use this money in your trust for education and only use it for donations. You can now specifically say you can only use it if you send it to an ENS with a verified namespace that is backing education and nonprofit. And so I think for future planning, that is and real estate planning, estate planning, that is pretty important. There's also DAO payrolls and benefits that exists. Opolis is a company that looks a lot like a decentralized TriNet. It's actually based out of Colorado, built by one of the co-founders or founders of ETH Denver. And so Opolis is great. It actually allows people to, I believe they have around 10,000 people they're supporting right now. They created an actual Colorado co-op where they have an EIN number and they provide people not just with W-2 payroll forms for working for DAOs, but also with benefits. And so their benefits are actually quite good, quite impressively good. So you have to be, an independent LLC that makes a certain amount of money, and then you can join Opolis and more or less buy benefits. And they are a company that has a lot of employees that they can negotiate pretty good deals for benefits. And then personally, I've built quite a bit around crypto trusts and estate planning. I care a lot about digital legacy, and so I think DAOs can be an interesting way for providing a cap table for beneficiaries, creating a dead man switch as a corporate action, and then instead of sharing your keys, just providing them with access to your DAO. And I think that's super cool way of doing it. I don't know about all the taxes. I don't know where the DAO should be created, what that company would look like. But for me, my first few steps into this journey was creating my own company. From there, putting funds together for that company, right? Having a real world address as well as a crypto address showing that this company has been funded. And then more or less using that as the front to talking to different groups. And then if I get paid, they pay that company. This is actually pretty important because we're in the space of a split between the traditional world and so TradeFi, traditional finance, and DeFi or crypto Narnia or whatever you want to call it. And there's a lot of money that's coming from institutions that want to invest, but they have limitations because they can only deal with KYC AML rules of parties that adhere to those fundraising laws. And so there is off-chain fundraising, which is literally a joint venture agreement of some sort, right? You have a cap table, you are voting on treasury allocations for that cap table, you put together board members. I did this quite a bit with the consortium space with R3. Basically, most of my time was spent working with legal to figure out how to create these boards for consortia, and it was really a pain. Most of the time, the members of the board would want shares, and so purchase a subset of shares, and then we created rules so that they can't own more than 15% of the company. And so we were making a lot of people mad because they wanted to buy up the entire company before even the tech was built. Anyway, this type of idea of multiple organizations coming together to fundraise, to create that joint venture, is fairly well defined. It's very slow. There's a lot of legal. If you are imagining this like pre-IPO, just kind of private market shares, when it goes IPO, the same thing happens, right? These parties were given their shares at a much lower price, right? They were investing their sweat equity into it, things like that. And then when it launches, then that's where they create liquidity pools, and that's where they create their way of either launching directly to an exchange in order to get more parties involved, distributing their shares to kind of bootstrap the market in the traditional IPO way. For the on-chain side, anything that can be done on Ethereum, it can be done on Polygon. We've seen a lot of on-chain fundraising in different places. There is that DAO treasury, so your collateral of tokens that gets created. Instead of your cap table, you have a DAO membership, which is just viewing the smart contract. Instead of doing voting on how you spend your money and kind of getting sign off from the board members, you basically use proposals for voting. You get token shares. And then you can also delegate your power to different parties. So you don't have to be super involved, but you can totally do that. Oh, I can answer some questions. The insurance companies could use this continuing benefits where yes. Just go to Opolis. DAO for nonprofits would be awesome. Where can we get DAO namespaces? I don't know. I don't actually know who is going to create this, but that is a big interest of mine. I think as states recognize DAOs as LLCs, they will also recognize that they will create their own ENS associated to it. And then hopefully the categorization of your LLC is also the categorization of your DAO. The benefits chart is through Opolis. So I think you have to be an employee of Opolis in order to see that. I am a partial investor of there, but I don't know if I can share the benefits chart, but I can put you in contact with their team. Yeah, keep asking questions. Cool. So tools and services, if you wanted to create your DAO, there is so much out there already in terms of documentation, in terms of governance, treasury management. This is created from one of the product leads of Codify, Corbin, and it's quite interesting. There's multiple versions of this out there already. I can share with you where these come from, and you can look through them. They're pretty well descriptive, and creating more or less a infrastructure stack so that you can not just start from writing contracts, but just using Web 2 tools so that you can build your DAO pretty quickly. So I would get started by looking at Raid Guild personally. I mean, they have demand for consulting, for design sprints, for joining any set of skills that you might have. They are super interesting. They have a lot of talented people that come from very talented backgrounds that leave all that at the door and they just work together. And it's okay to work with people anonymously. They just care about whether or not you have an internal reputation to deliver good work, then you can get properly compensated. So within Consensus, we've done a bit of everything associated with digital assets. Starting with the DAO, we've done ICOs. We had a whole token foundry group. We did fundraising. We did a bunch of stuff. And then I think a majority of the time we're stuck in this STO world, because after all of the requirements, we said, okay, let's just make sure what we're doing are securities, and let's help with bridging real world assets as collateral into the crypto world. So creating universal token, following the regulations, creating KYC AML. We've done that for the past 2 years. In the DeFi space, we're still very, very connected with ETH2 and the merge. And I think last time I spoke with you guys about the merge and when that's coming. In general, DeFi is looking at, based off of stable coins, and a lot of people are looking at creating bank-based stable coins again. They are looking for ways to create value off of illiquid assets, bridge over existing financial instruments into DeFi, and then hopefully oversubscribing and selling those instruments. It's a little tough to do when you do it that way, but the latest trend is what we've seen with SocGen Forge. So SocGen, as a pretty big French bank, used a $20 million bond as collateral inside of MakerDAO's collateral debt position contract, and they were able to borrow into DAI, which is the stable coin, algorithmic stable coin. From there, I mean, it's still kind of DeFi is still a big part of everything. This NFT craze with creators and with large IP holders has been quite interesting. I love the multi-artist collaboration. I love how it also usually ties into some climate change action, some green action. I like the idea of digital twins. So with NFTs, and I like to give the example of Tesla. If you were able to purchase a Tesla NFT, and then with that NFT prove to your dealership that you've purchased it with crypto, then you can redeem it for a physical car. And then if you sell your physical car for fiat, then you've effectively created a bridge between crypto and fiat. And that's kind of how you get better adoption. Especially from the game side, everything's kind of starting off as a NFT building block, and I think the value of NFTs specifically will be less about hype later on. Maybe collections with limited number of attributes based on what was launched from some generative ceremony is not really as cool as saying, well, this NFT now can be provided into a design network, and people that want to add on certain skins for games to the NFT then has additional value because now it can be used across multiple games, or it can be used across multiple AR filters or things like that. So I think that's where it could be pretty interesting. I know that autographs is another big piece of NFT layers. If you have a famous influencer that mentions you in one of their tweets, that's almost like, hey, I've gotten exposure to this influencer's network. I think for the NFT, it could do the same thing. An influencer could sign the NFT, and then you could say, well, it's worth more because it was signed by, some YouTube person, Logan Paul signed it or something, whoever knows. I think this is all going back to DAOs, just bringing it back to the idea of Tesla having a NFT. I think it's much more interesting if Tesla had a DAO. And so whenever they launch their fully automated driving, I would say that Tesla, instead of just keeping it as a smart contract wallet, could actually itself, every Tesla could be a company. And you could own fully that company. And then after you get dropped off to work, the company goes off and tries to make money, right? It tries to pick up as an automated taxi. And I think that's super cool because then the DAO can get paid in crypto into the DAO treasury. You can optimize your machine learning and your AI to have that company be super aggressive to make money, or just make sure it breaks even on different types of charging and things like that to pay off its debt. And I think that with the DAO structure in mind, it will be pretty interesting when you can think about an autonomous driving company that is all on chain. So really, really looking forward to how this space evolves. I think it's kind of coming full circle to this kind of self-organizing company. You can imagine even buying into a fund that buys multiple Teslas, and maybe the dealerships now become a bunch of Tesla funds. And so, yeah, it's a super interesting space to kind of think through, and hopefully you can get involved, right? Hopefully you're thinking about different projects that you can work on, how you can work with different DAOs, how you can build different DAO projects, and super greenfield, but a lot of friendly people out there. I think that is it on my side for slides.
Thank you, Clemens. A couple questions. First, and we're almost out of time. In terms of the M&A stuff that you see happening, do you have any examples of where DAOs have merged? And what typically is the due diligence that each DAO does on the other? I mean, obviously, a lot of it is transparent, but then there is probably portions that are not so transparent. Like, for example, who's behind the curtain in some of these things, if the address is all you can see. So what have you seen in terms of M&A in the space? And I think that's a very interesting space. If you've done M&A and you're coming from the banking world, as DAOs become more and more prominent, and M&As and merger and acquisitions are going to become a more frequent activity. So what have you seen in that space? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I had one example, forgot the name of the merge. So it's likely that instead of fully taking over the communities together, there will be an offshoot of a new community, because it just makes more sense in terms of how they do the funds. It's better to not remove a token, but to create a new one. So a merge of two DAOs could just look like, hey, we're going to airdrop all these new tokens to all the combination of these two DAOs together, and then create a new DAO altogether. That seems a little bit more efficient. And then from there, the DAO can send transactions of their treasury to the new DAO. And so that's where you have the merge. It is very specific to certain types. Like, if you have a protocol DAO, for example, they're not going to merge with another protocol. I don't think that makes sense. If you have a collection, maybe that could merge. If you have, something that's dealing with media and dealing with, maybe that could, but it's a conversation between the two communities, and thinking, well, we're doing exactly the same thing. We're not competing each other with the space. The same people are on both Discords at the same time. Let's just merge these communities and work together. And I don't think that there's that same hierarchy of saying like, oh, well, I founded this and I don't want to do that because now my tokens are going to be diluted or something like that. So I think the conversations that happen in this space are kind of less guarded by legal. I'm sure they would benefit from a lot of legal counsel, but that just seems to be how it works as of now. But it could evolve into quite a bit. So who knows?
We got some questions here. Let me just go to the ones that there were some that were asked earlier. Question from Tim: are there any analytical tools that specialize in DAO insights to understand DAO to DAO relationships, transactions, and internal voting parties / cohorts?
I don't think I've seen that mapping of which DAOs have moved their tokens into other DAOs treasuries. I think that would be super interesting. I mean, this does a high level view of their market cap and value and what is in their treasury, but I don't think it does a breakdown of who has put money in. Maybe they have, oh, it does. So it shows that, these are the currencies inside of that DAO. So you can probably do some cross, and you can see all the proposals that they have. It would be super interesting to see how tightly knit this looks, because it probably is very tightly knit.
Yeah. So yeah, there may be an opportunity to create that tool that has that capability. Question from Christina: do you know of any DAOs that like fan art as part of their collections or projects?
I think I heard of one during MCon for fan art. I think somebody was trying to raise money to create like their own manga, and they were great artists, and they had a DAO that they created around that. But if you don't see one, then make one yourself. It's pretty easy to do. Just go through like Reddit subreddits and then see if there's any threads of creating DAOs through subreddits. I think Discourse may have discovery of DAOs is also not an issue, but like the ones in Deep DAO are fairly big. Like you're not going to reinvent Shapeshift. Shapeshift has been around for 5 years or something like that. And I don't know if it goes all the way to, I guess it has 150 or so here. These are usually for maybe in DAO House, you'll be able to view different DAOs that are available. Yeah, so user participation in DAOs for voting is very similar to any type of democratic process. Not everybody likes to vote, especially if you've kind of sent out a bunch of tokens and those addresses are quiet. Like it's pretty hard to get voter participation. And it's a little bit off because, for example, I have tokens in a lot of these and I'm not voting because I'm just not paying attention to it. So the reason why it's so low is also there's not a lot of proposals. When those proposals go through, maybe a few dozen people even know about that proposal, and then off of that they're just providing their mini votes for it. If it's a smaller allocation, there's also things called sub DAOs. So within a DAO, imagine your company had to create a budget line for a product inside of your company. Maybe you have multiple products, and so you may have a split of the sub DAO with a subset of your treasury just to do marketing, for example. And so those sub DAOs will have higher voter participation because now you're splitting up your DAO into a bunch of people that might be just interested in their expertise, and they might be provided a higher level funding. And so now your super DAO, or kind of your top level DAO, is just providing funding for their sub DAOs, and then those sub DAOs have their own voting processes that are more specific to action items. And it sounds kind of overkill, but it's literally what happens in a regular company. You have your treasurer, you have your kind of head of finance more or less allocate budgets. Just imagine that, but done in smart contracts. Right now I can say, hey, I've allocated budget because we all voted that this particular group needs more money to complete the task.
Okay, I will take one last question, Clemens, and I think we need to wrap it up. Question from Will: what's the most creative DAO you've been exposed to so far?
The most creative DAO. Most creative DAO. There's so many. Do I like a tool? I personally, I like Flamingo DAO because it's a DAO. It has legal backing to it. It has legal documentation of how it was created and where it's created. It purchases a bunch of NFTs, but that's not really that creative. Some of these I don't even know. There's so many of them out there. Rocket Pool.
I think there's a lot of creativity occurring in the space, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
So there's just the whole space is very, very creative. Probably one of the most creative spaces in the blockchain world right now is the DAOs. People are thinking everything through and rethinking it. So I think across the board, we have lots of creativity. And then the word creativity is fairly subjective, right? So.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stable coins, like multi-coin collaborations like Fei, and how it works together to create a stable. There's a lot of weird economic incentives that people are playing with. There's marketplaces for NFTs. There's AMMs like Uniswap. So I think it's just treating it as a new. Olympus DAO is a brand new. I just heard of a Klima DAO, which is basically a DAO that buys up carbon credits, global carbon credits, to create scarcity, which is kind of interesting. And then more and more parties they basically establish themselves as a fund. And within that fund, people that are their purchasing power increases, then you kind of create scarcity in the public market. And hopefully then they also commit to higher amounts of becoming carbon neutral or carbon offset. So pretty interesting. And they're doing forks of these DAOs, right? So the Olympus DAO has a bunch of forks out there.
Okay, fantastic. We are out of time. Clemens, thank you so much for spending your morning with us. It's your 6 o'clock to 7 a.m. Slot with us. Thank you all for joining us this New York City morning. The video will be available on blockchain101.com probably by the end of the day today. We just need to kind of tidy it up, and then we'll push it out. The slide deck, I will leave it to Clemens to drop into the Slack, and then we will also attach the slide deck to the video. It's kind of a combo thing on blockchain101.com. You can grab both. Thank you everyone for joining us. See you Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern. We will have the Bank of England talking to us about their CBDC work. Very interesting stuff. And then Tuesday evening, we have, I think it was the yield farming session. So a lot more stuff coming up the next few days. Take care, guys, and have a great weekend.